Hey y'all, it's Alex from You Should Craft, and today I'm going to show you how to make the small size of my double twist pumpkins. The pattern is written for 3 different sizes, but this video is just for the small, which will fit in the palm of your hand. In order to crochet this, you'll need some sort of stuffing to fill your pumpkin with. I'm using regular fiber fill, but you could use fabric scraps or yarn scraps, like anything that could stuff a pumpkin. You'll need something for your stems. I'm using sticks that I got out of my yard and cut down to about 1 inch or 1.5 inches long. And I baked them in the oven beforehand just to make sure that they didn't have any bugs or anything weird in them. And then you'll need a tapestry needle and scissors, just kind of your regular supplies. You'll also need worsted weight yarn. You probably want several colors because the pumpkins are really fun to make. I've already got a whole bunch, but you can use any kind of worsted weight yarn, like any scraps that you have. Or my current favorite thing is to use Brava from We Crochet. So these little minis come in packs of 24 or 25. And each of these little baby skeins makes 2 of the small size of pumpkin. So if you buy a pack of them, you can make 50 pumpkins, which is awesome. Or they have regular 100-gram balls too. And then for the worsted weight yarn, you'll also need an H crochet hook. This is a blue Odyssey from Furls Crochet. And you can easily change the size of your pumpkins if you want to by using a different yarn. So a smaller yarn and a smaller hook would make a smaller pumpkin, and using a chunky yarn and a bigger hook would make bigger pumpkins for you. So feel free to mess around with it. But if you want to use my yarn and my hooks, I'll put the links in the description just so you can check it out. But all right, let's get started with our pumpkins. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is chain 11. So start off with your slip knot. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. We're going to be doing single crochets. So this starting chain of 11 will give us 10 stitches in each row. The next thing we're going to do is just single crochet in every stitch across. And I always use the back bumps. Oops. So if you're not sure, here's your starting chain, and it looks like the V's at the top of stitches. And this is the top of the chain, but I'm crocheting into the bottom. So these little chain links in between each V, those are where I'm putting my single crochets. But honestly, it doesn't really matter where you crochet into the chain for this project because we're going to seam it together at this joint anyway. All right, so there's our 10th. You can go ahead and count if you want to, but it doesn't really matter how many stitches you have. If you have one more or one less, it really just means you're going to end up with this slightly larger or slightly smaller pumpkin. But just to check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we are on to row 2, and in the pattern I have this labeled as row 2A. So these are where we're going to do our twisted single crochets. So if you look at the pumpkin, there are these sets of textured bumps, and this is made by twisted single crochets. So we put 2 rows of twisted single crochets next to each other, and that's how it got the name the double twist pumpkin. So you'll chain 1 and turn, And we're going to go into the back loops only for our twisted single crochets. So if this is your V, these ones are the front, the ones that are closest to you. And these, oh, it's hard to see it, but these ones are the back loops. So we're going in the back loops for our twisted single crochets. And a twisted single crochet starts off the same as a normal single crochet, but then you do a full counterclockwise turn. I've also heard that some people are able to just kind of flick their hook in order to get the twisting instead of doing a full turn. I haven't really nailed that down yet though. But you could kind of flick it like that. But I just think it's fun to make the big turn, so that's what I always do. And so if you look, you can see that this is starting to make like this really textured ridge on the other side. But something that's kind of weird about the twisted single crochets is that they only show up on one side of your work. So we're going to need to do something else on the back once we finish. And I find that if you lift your hook a little bit at this step, you can get a looser loop up here. And then and then you have a little bit extra to work with when you twist it. And that just makes it easier to get your hook through. But so there's our row of the twisted single crochets. And then you'll chain one and turn your work. And now we're going to crochet into the other loops. So this is row 2B in the pattern. And you can see the loops right here. So these are the loops we skipped before. And now that we've turned, there are back loops again. So we're just going to do regular single crochets into every stitch of this row. And if you look, you can see that these are kind of behind your twisted single crochets. And if you look at the back, it just looks like 2 rows of single crochet on top of each other, and you can't even see the twisting because again, that only shows up on the front. All right, so we just have 2 more of our normal single crochets for row 2B. And so now we're about to start our repeat. So chain 1, and this is going to be row 3, and this is the section that you'll repeat until you reach the end of your pumpkin. So I'm single crocheting across. Again, this will be 10 stitches. And then you'll do another row of single crochets. So chain 1 and turn. Okay, so this is our kind of spacer section that will divide the twists up, kind of. And what we're going to do now is another row of our twisted single crochets. So this is row 5A. And just like row 2, we're going to go in the back loops only. All right, so now that I've completed that row of twisted single crochets, I'll chain 1 and turn, and now I'm going to go in the other back loops, these ones right here that we skipped last time. And so just like before, I'm going to put 10 single crochets across this row. So now I chain one and turn, and this is our first double twist section. So I'm going to do another row of twisted single crochets. All right. And then again, you're going to chain one and turn. And for the B part of this row, we're going to go into the other back loops and just do 10 single crochets across. And so this is the last part of our repeated section. So here is our first repeat. So this section right here, starting with row 3, that is the section you're going to repeat. And you're going to repeat that 4 more times. So you'll have a total of 5 of these double twist sections once you finish. And it'll just end up looking like a big rectangle. So go ahead and pause the video and finish up those repeats. And I'll check back with you in the end to finish off our rectangle. All right, welcome back. So here is where we left off. And then we repeated this section right here 4 more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're ready to just wrap up this rectangle part before we turn it into a pumpkin. So I'm going to chain one and turn. And just like before, I'm going to put in 2 rows of just straight single crochets. And I'm going to try not to skip the first stitch because I almost did. All right, so there's 1 row. So I chained 1, now I'm turning. So you'll notice this is looking a lot like the section we were working on before, our repeat. But the difference is that we're not going to do a double twist here because at the beginning, we already had our first twist and our little spacer row. So we're going to do an A row, which is just twisted single crochets, and then we're going to wrap it up. And so this will be the end of like the body of the pumpkin. So chain 1 and turn. And then again, we're just going in the back loops only to do those twisted single crochets. So here's what the back looks like. This will end up being the inside of your pumpkin. And then here is the front. So go ahead and grab your scissors and your tapestry needle, and I'll show you how to put it all together. Okay, so once you've finished, the first thing you're going to do is trim a large yarn tail. This is maybe like 18 inches. It's about twice as long as my rectangle that I crocheted. And then pull out your hook and you'll join your tapestry needle. And what we're going to do now is make our pumpkin go from being a flat rectangle to being a pumpkin. So we need to make it round. So the first thing we'll do is join our first and last rows together so that ends up looking, I guess, like an arm cuff. So we'll start off and we'll just have a tube. So I've got my tapestry needle in. And I guess it's not technically the last row because the last row was these twisted single crochets and you can't join on top of those. So what we're joining are these leftover back loops from the previous row. And we will connect them to our first row. So we're just whip stitching. So I'm just looping through both sides. You want to make sure that you're pulling it tight because the goal is for this section to look just like these other double twist sections. And so again, this isn't like intense sewing. This is just simple whip stitching. So just going through the loops on both sides and making sure you're pulling it tight as you go, because it's hard to pull it all tight at once at the end. All right, so when you're done, both of your tails should be on the same side. And now that it's joined, this joined section looks the same as our other double twist sections. So now what we're going to do is what's called a running stitch, which again is kind of like, I don't know, lazy sewing. But we're just going to put our needle through the very tops of each row. And so we'll pull it tight as we go, which creates kind of a ruching, and that's what's going to help us get a round pumpkin. So you can see that as you go, your hole is getting smaller. And you don't have to hit every stitch, but kind of the more that you get, the cleaner it will look when you're done. So I've just got a little bit left, and you could see that my hole is a lot more closed off than it was before. And this part will end up being the bottom of your pumpkin, so we're going to close it 100% of the way. Because we don't have to put a stem or anything in here. And so I found that when you've gone all the way around, you'll still see like a little bit of a hole. So to make it super tight, you might need to go around a second time. And again, we're just kind of pulling it tight as we go. The second time can be a lot less precise than the first time. And if you need to, you can also go across the hole. So I'll get a couple more before I go to the other side. So oh, and you also want to get this like extra tail inside your pumpkin. So do that before you close the hole all the way. So mine's pretty much closed, but I can pull my yarn from one side to the other side just to make it a little bit more secure. And once it gets really tight in here, it's actually kind of hard to get your needle in, which is kind of the sign to you that you've been doing a good job. All right, so I'm just going to do a little bit more. And now I've got a 100% closed hole. So what I do is just stick the needle through to the inside of the pumpkin and pull it all the way out. And then you can go ahead and trim your yarn. And what I like to do just to secure it all is to just tie a knot. This can be any type of knot, but I like to get that yarn tail from my starting chain and this yarn that I was using to secure everything. And you can trim these off if you want to, but it doesn't matter because we're going to put stuffing in there. But here's the bottom of our pumpkin. And basically we're going to cut another piece of yarn. Maybe 12 inches long, it doesn't really matter. And we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to running stitch around the top of the pumpkin. But this time we're going to need to add stuffing. And we're going to need to put in our stem before we close it. And also, since your yarn isn't joined, you'll need to keep an eye on how tight you're pulling so that you don't pull it all the way through. And so now, since you have two sides of your yarn, you can kind of use both of them to pull it tight while making sure that you're not pulling your yarn all the way through. So once you've gone all the way around and your hole is maybe half closed, you can go ahead and start adding your stuffing. If it's all the way closed, you won't be able to get it in. So just kind of jam your stuffing in there. And you can kind of smash your pumpkin down a little bit just to get a feel for if there's any spaces that need stuffing that don't have it, or if you added too much. And it's kind of up to you how stuffed you want your pumpkin to be. So now you can kind of put your stem in there to just get a feel for how big of a hole you're going to need to leave. And once it's all the way closed, you'll also have a better idea of whether or not you need more stuffing. So I actually do want a little bit more for mine. And so now what I do is I go more than all the way around, and this lets me pull these and get it super tight. So now I can put my stem in there, and you kind of smush it down to make it be more pumpkin-y and less round. And you can keep going around this hole a little bit. And I just kind of keep making it tight. And then once it seems really tight, I like to put my needle in and pull it out the bottom. And this kind of helps it get, I don't even know what it's called, but like that divot by the stem. This just kind of helps it be more pumpkin shaped. So it pulls the center in a little bit more. And then I do that same thing, but from the other side. So where I start at the bottom, and I put my needle all the way through. Oops, my stem's coming out. And so this is where you would hot glue if you need to. Again, I've had a lot of success with just pulling it really tight. But I also don't have children who are going to be like messing with my pumpkins. So once you've got your pumpkin looking the way that you want and you're pretty satisfied with it, you can go ahead and I like to like tie a knot to secure it. And then I rejoin my tapestry needle and I just do a little bit more weaving. Mm-hmm. And when you're satisfied, you can just trim your yarn. And I always try to trim like a shorter tail. And then when I pull it through one more time, my yarn will like come off of my hook and it'll just end up inside of my pumpkin. And if it doesn't, like in this situation, it came up a little bit, you can just trim that off because it's already woven in a lot. But that's it. You'll do the same thing with this other end. And then you've got your very own double twist pumpkin. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the You Should Craft channel for more tutorials and patterns. And check out the You Should Craft blog.